this video, I'm going to cover the differences between pro audio, pro bass management that's used in studios, specifically for monitoring Dolby Atmos and the home theater environment, why they're different, and whether you should consider doing what they do in the pro environment. However, Dolby has a standard for what they expect the pro environment to look like in order to properly monitor movies. It's completely different. In that small room, a conscious choice was made not to follow the Dolby standard for bass management, because while that is the standard, and I actually think it's quite debatable that that standard makes sense, there is good reason to believe that that is not the right way to handle it. In a typical home theater of more reasonable modest size, like a 350 square foot theater, none of that's true. Basically, the reflections are happening in such a way, everything you're hearing has already reflected off the walls many, many times. And so there's not really a point in having these distinct and discrete subwoofers for each zone or location in the room. Instead, it actually makes more sense to have lots of subwoofers that all get a mono signal that's then optimized to smooth out the bass. That's different, and that's going to probably change everything. But as long as we're not talking about that, this standard approach that Dolby uses in the pro environment really makes little to no sense in smaller rooms. And it actually, residential rooms I should say, these smaller ones. As I said, they really need to use that mono signal approach. That tends to be a much better way of handling the bass because you can send the same signal basically to all the subs, you can EQ them, and you can end up with a result that gives you very consistent, clean bass, which is really what you want. I never really thought of it as an interesting video until I realized that it's so drastically different, and there's so much, I would call it like misunderstanding. So if you guys could come up with some good questions for me to answer, I'd really appreciate that.